Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into something absolutely wild, the mind-bending mechanics and hidden architecture of the marine food web. You know, when we look out at the ocean, we usually just see this massive, endless expanse of blue. But beneath the surface, there's an incredibly complex network of energy transfer that literally keeps our entire planet breathing. We're going to map out exactly how this invisible engine works, starting from the microscopic foundation and going all the way up to those giant apex predators. So let's jump right into this massive paradox. How in the world can an ocean, which is seemingly empty of anything resembling a forest, support giants like the humpback whale? Think about it. On land, if you want to support massive herbivores and predators, you need immense, highly visible grasslands and giant forests, right? But out in the open ocean, you could sail for weeks and never see a single leaf or blade of grass. Yet this watery void supports a truly staggering amount of animal life. And this brings us to a really cool concept called the inverted biomass pyramid. On land, supporting life requires a massive, heavy foundation of plant biomass. We're talking mature trees that lock up energy for hundreds or even thousands of years. But the ocean, it plays by a completely different rulebook. Down there, the combined weight of the consumers, the copepods, the krill, the shrimp, the fish, is actually heavier than the biomass of the primary producers. The pyramid is literally upside down. Why? Because the ocean's producers are tiny phytoplankton. They have a really small total mass at any given second, sure, but they grow and reproduce so incredibly fast that their actual rate of energy production is just off the charts. Section 1. The invisible microbial engine. To really understand how this upside-down pyramid doesn't just immediately topple over, we've got to shrink all the way down to the microscopic level. Take a deep breath. Now, 20% of the oxygen you just pulled into your lungs was generated by a single marine bacterium called Prochlorococcus. No joke. This tiny organism is the smallest known photosynthetic organism on Earth. It's only about 0.5 to 0.8 micrometers wide, and yet it sits right at the absolute base of this food web, pulling massive amounts of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and handing us a fifth of the oxygen we breathe. To put that into perspective, a single drop of surface seawater can contain 100,000 of these Prochlorococcus cells. Worldwide, we're talking an estimated several octillion of them. It's a number so big it hardly makes sense. But here is the real secret to their success. These tiny organisms only live for about one single day. They reproduce so unbelievably fast, the whole global phytoplankton population turns over in just a week, that they can actually sustain the massive, crushing weight of the ocean's consumers pressing down on them from above. So you might be wondering, if these bacteria are reproducing by the octillions, why don't they just completely choke the oceans? Well, the answer is viruses, and I mean a lot of them. In every single milliliter of seawater, there are about 10 million marine viruses. Through this pretty brutal mechanism known as the viral shunt, giant marine viruses literally explode these bacteria. It sounds crazy, but it recycles their carbon right back into dissolved organic matter. This feeds other microorganisms in the microbial loop, sure, but more importantly, it acts as a crucial check and balance. It totally prevents any single species of microbe from taking over the microenvironment. Section 2. Climbing the food web. Now that we've got the microscopic base sorted out, let's zoom back out to the macro level and see how this energy actually travels up to those big predators we know and love. Energy surges up this trophic ladder ridiculously fast. It starts with our primary producers, the phytoplankton, which are immediately vacuumed up by drifting zooplankton, things like copepods and krill. From there, the energy jumps to small, schooling forage fish that are just feasting on that zooplankton. And finally, boom, we hit the apex predators at the very top. Swordfish, marine mammals, sharks. The energy flows sequentially right up this chain, transferring massive amounts of power in the blink of an eye. But here's the thing, the food web is not a one-way street. Massive marine mammals actually return essential nutrients right back to the surface to fertilize the phytoplankton, completely closing the loop. Researchers actually call this the whale pump. Think about it. Whales dive deep down into the dark to feed on these dense swarms of krill, but they have to surface to breathe, right? And when they do, they leave behind a liquid plume. It's essentially a massive nutrient dump. This fertilizer stays at the surface, giving the phytoplankton exactly what they need to jumpstart the entire food web all over again. Section 3. Extreme environments, the polar webs. So, what happens to this incredible structure when we travel to the absolute most freezing environments on the planet?
Turns out, geography fundamentally writes the rules of the food web here. It dictates exactly why you will never, ever see a polar bear chasing a penguin. Up in the Arctic, you basically have a frozen ocean completely surrounded by land. Because of that, land-based predators like polar bears actually rule the ice, right alongside key species like the walrus and ice algin. But flip down to the Antarctic, and it's the exact opposite, a frozen continent surrounded by a massive circulating ocean. This leads to a totally different web dominated by killer whales, penguins, and massive swarms of krill. They are both absolutely freezing polar extremes, but their baseline topographies create completely unique ecological networks.
Section 4. Keystones, Cascades, and Fragility. Despite its massive scale and global reach, we really need to look at how surprisingly fragile this whole interconnected system is. Think of the marine food web like a highly complex, giant Jenga tower. If you pull out just one specific block, like the sea otter, the whole ecosystem can literally collapse. Ecologists call this a top-down trophic cascade. See, sea otters are what's known as a keystone species. Their role in the environment is disproportionately massive compared to how many of them there actually are. They eat sea urchins. So when otters get removed from the system, which happened historically because of fur hunting, the sea urchin population just explodes. And those urchins, they march across the seafloor, chewing completely through the base or holdfasts of the giant kelp. Without the otters there to keep the urchins in check, the foundational kelp forest just completely disappears, taking all the other species that rely on it down with it. Section 5. The Human Threat. And this brings us to what is easily the most pressing issue of our time: how human-induced changes are essentially pulling multiple Jenga blocks out of the tower all at once. Right now, we're seeing chemical changes in the water that are quite literally dissolving the foundational creatures of the food web. As our oceans absorb excess carbon, they undergo something called ocean acidification. For tiny creatures like tritopods, which are essentially these little swimming sea snails, this increased acidity literally dissolves their protective shells. At the same time, it's causing creatures like brittle stars to lose vital muscle mass. And why does this matter to us? Because those tritopods are a crucial prey item for everything from larger plankton and fish all the way up to seabirds and whales. Acidification is basically attacking the food web from the absolute bottom up. And as the oceans warm up, we're seeing this super dangerous shift toward unpalatable cyanobacteria, which completely chokes off the energy supply to the animals above them. Now, you might think increased temperatures would actually increase the overall productivity of microscopic marine plants, but the type of plant really matters. Studies are showing that a warmed future leads to a huge expansion of cyanobacteria, basically small blue-green algae. The problem? They are completely unpalatable. Think of it as the ocean's junk food that absolutely nobody wants to eat. The herbivores simply will not touch them. It's an ecological dead end. So even if there's technically more primary production happening, the energy stops right there. It doesn't transfer up the chain to the fish, the birds, or the mammals. This quote from the research perfectly distills what's at stake here. We are facing widespread food web simplification. When that crucial energy flow from the primary producers to the intermediate consumers gets choked off, the incredibly intricate, multi-layered web we've been exploring today just begins to flatten out. A shift toward a detritus-based system basically means we move away from a vibrant, dynamic web of predators and prey and move toward an ecosystem that's just dominated by dead organic matter and the bacteria that decompose it. It is a fundamental, terrifying rewiring of the ocean's engine. So I'll leave you with this final, provocative thought. Our own survival is deeply, deeply anchored to those invisible microbial engines of the sea. Humans sit way up at the top of this incredibly complex, yet beautifully fragile inverted pyramid. Every other breath you take comes directly from the microscopic phytoplankton drifting around in the photic zone. Our global fisheries, our climate stability, literally the very chemistry of our planet, relies on this system running smoothly. As we see these lower blocks beginning to dissolve and shift, we really have to ask ourselves, how long can the top of the pyramid hold when the base is giving way? Thanks for hanging out and exploring the mechanics of the marine food web with me today in this explainer.